Hey folks, my name is Andrew. Been living here in Monterey for about 6-7 years now, and I wanted to do kind of a little series about things to see and do in Monterey. Monterey is a pretty big tourist spot, and so I hope to help out some people that are looking to visit Monterey with things to do, just kind of advice on how to do those things, and hopefully this makes your trip a little bit better. So today what I want to discuss is whale watching, and in particular my favorite aspect of whale watching, which is photography. Now I'll post kind of a link to some of my photos on here, but for me, Monterey, the ocean is where it's at. I've been a deckhand slash naturalist on a whale watching boat out of Monterey for about a year now, and it truly is a blast. And so I wanted to share just some of my advice for getting just those spectacular photos of whales. So my first piece of advice is go in with low expectations, because while my company, the company that I work for, guarantees that you will see a whale, that's all we guarantee, that you will see a whale. Doesn't mean that the whale's going to be breaching, it doesn't mean the whale's going to be feeding, and it doesn't mean it's going to be a certain specific type of whale. There are certain seasons for different whales, but we just guarantee a whale. Now, that being said, whales can breach, whales do things crazy, ridiculous, awesome behaviors that people love to see, and you want to be ready to capture that moment. You want to capture that moment as best as possible. So my first piece of advice is, if you're going to go whale watching, try and have a nicer camera with you. So I have a Nikon D3300. It's a base model DSLR. Does its job. It actually takes good photos for the cost, and I love it. It's fairly cheap, so if something does happen to it, gets wet, what have you, it's not the end of the world. It's not like I'm losing a couple $1,000 camera, and it's easily replaced. That being said, where you do generally want to spend a little bit of money on is on your lenses. So I'll kind of dive into lenses first, and then I'll kind of get back to the camera. So the main lens I use on the boat is this lens. This is my Sigma 100-400. I love it. It's got a couple different modes on here. So it's got autofocus and manual modes. I can set my distance for focusing. It's got optical stabilization, and it's got 2 modes for that. And then it's also got custom modes. So the cool thing with the custom modes is that there's a dock that you can take this, put it onto your computer, and then when using it with the dock, you can adjust some of the settings. So on my custom 1 setting, I have it set to fast focus, and I have it set for 25 to infinite meters. And so the nice thing about that is that a lot of times on the whale watching boats, kind of the general rule of thumb is to not get within 100 meters of the whales. That being said, if they come closer to us, it happens. But so a lot of times you are shooting from further away, and so having the ability to go up to 400 millimeters focal point, and having that quick focusing and being able to focus far away is definitely a very useful tool. Now, the first lens I got, because the thing about this, a lens like this is fairly expensive. This one is a cheaper one, and it was about $800. Now, the first lens I got was this lens. So this is a Nikon 70-300, and it was about $150 or so. And so it's fairly cheap. It can go up to 300 millimeters, which is pretty good zoom. And then The one downside to it though is that it is manual focus. So in order to focus it, you have to rotate this ring here. So I was constantly out there trying to have it in focus and either missing a shot or having a shot come out blurry, which can be very frustrating. That being said, I was able to get plenty of excellent shots with this lens, but it does take some time getting used to the idea of manual focusing. The other lens that I used, and this is more my travel lens, so when I went up to Norway to go look at the killer whales there, this was the lens I used up there. And this is a Sigma 18 to 250. So I like it because it has, what makes it a great travel lens is that it's fairly small and compact. So this is my 400 millimeter lens. This is this 18 to 250. So you can see it's a lot smaller. And not only that, but it shoots a wide range. So for example, when I was shooting photos of the Northern Lights, you want a very wide focal point. So I had it at 18 millimeters. And then when I was shooting things like the killer whales, I had it all the way extended out to 250. So it's not the best lens when it comes to its extremes. It certainly doesn't perform as well at 18 as my 18 to 55 does, and it certainly doesn't perform as well at 250 as my 100 or 400 does. But overall, it's a decent lens. It's fairly fast autofocusing. Does have two modes, the autofocus manual and the autofocus and the manual focus, and then it's got optical stabilization as well. And I like it. It works well, it does the job. I think it was also fairly cheap as well, around $200, $250. So it's a great kind of all-around lens, but it is kind of the jack of all trades, master of none. So it's not a good pure telephoto lens, and it's not necessarily a good wide angle lens. But when you're traveling and you need something that can get kind of both, and you want something lightweight, compact, it does the job. And so kind of with that, that's kind of what I use for lenses. So back to the camera itself, what you really want to be looking for is, like I said, preferably a DSLR. So that way you can put these telephoto lenses and stuff on them. And then also, a good manual mode. What I love about the D3300 is that, I set it in manual. Generally kind of check it with the light, what side of the boat we are with the whales. Because if we're kind of into the sun, I'll have a lower ISO. If we're kind of got the sun kind of in the shade, I'll have a little bit higher of an ISO. Ideally, you don't want your ISO above 800. However, because then you get a little bit more of the light noise. But the D3300 does have a pretty good noise reduction in it, so that is one thing I do really like about it. And then the other thing with that is that your shutter speed. So for kind of capturing the most amount of detail, I tend to prefer a faster shutter speed, especially when you're photographing moving things like whales, dolphins, especially when they're moving faster. So for faster moving animals like a dolphin, I generally keep my shutter speed around, try and keep it around 1500 to 2000 of a second. And then for kind of slower animals, some of the bigger whales, generally between a thousandth of a second and 1/1200th of a second, generally captures the most detail. You can keep your ISO fairly low, and that tends to help with capturing the whales. Other things that you can look at is where you're positioned on the boat. So I know a lot of people that when they get on our boat, they want to be at the top deck thinking that's going to get them the best spot. Well, oftentimes at our top deck, that's where everyone is. There's not a lot of rail space there. So sometimes by going down to the lower deck, you do get better shots because you're right down there, and there might not be as many people and you have a bigger space to spread out. The other thing with getting lower shots is that you're closer to the water, so you're closer to the animals. So especially if you're shooting like dolphin, or sometimes we get killer whales that come right up to the boat, things like that. Oftentimes you get better photos by being lower. One of our professional photographers that come out with us a lot, he will actually get down on his knees next to the rails to get as low of a shot as possible, and his shots are amazing. So being up at the top deck of a boat doesn't necessarily ensure that you're going to get the best shots. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to mention them in the comments, and I'll be kind of doing more photos and like links to some of my photos and my Instagram. And feel free to give me a follow on Instagram, or comment any questions you may have. And have a good one.